I see where your generation is at with having land, and I'm so sorry. You know what I mean? Like I feel really bad, like in my heart.
Yeah.
Let me finish the thought. I was your age. I was 25 and I was landless. And it seemed so overwhelming to me. And I knew that I needed a piece of land to be free because so I could do my rewilding work. And it was hard and it took a long time, but it was so much more. I didn't know how accessible it was to me back then. I thought it was a mountain that I couldn't climb, you know? So, um,
Yeah.
so it's two things I want to say. Is one thing is that there is a way you can make it happen. You know, it was easier for me back then, but it's still, I still couldn't even imagine it. And it took everything that I had to believe in myself and to come up with creative solutions. You know, like I think it's why the off-grid movement has taken off so big, because it's so much cheaper to go get a piece of land and build yourself a cabin than to try to get into the system, you know? Um,
Yeah.
so I think the what I was started to say before I really tapped into that pain, because I do feel like there is something happening right now that's irresponsible from the older generation to the younger generation on a macro scale. Like the inflation in the stock, the shareholder economy is robbing wealth from younger generations, and that's not right. It shouldn't happen, and I don't know how to actually change that. But the other thing I was going to say, a lot of people really want to get on land together, and I've seen that in my area in Northern California. I've seen a lot of failed. I've seen a lot of um, broken dreams in that world. So I would say if anybody's watching this, they're considering like getting land with 3 of their buddies or whatever, or 7 people or whatever it is. Like um, it doesn't. It's very, very challenging, and it takes a level of. It's almost like you have to go like, okay, I'm going to get married to my husband or my wife. Now I'm going to get married to these people, and often it doesn't work out. So I chose the model of like I'm going to get the land personally, and then I'm going to be basically the chief of my little fiefdom, and I'm going to be an honorable person, and I'm going to rent out space to others who want to come and live this lifestyle. So that's the model that I chose, because I saw too many people trying to go the other route, and it's just like, oh, they do it for 5 years, and then there's usually a bad breakup, and it doesn't work out, and then they go back to living in the city. Um, so I don't know if that's the right advice. I'd like there to be a more community oriented one, and I'm totally like bring it on. Let's have people. Let's talk to people who know how to do that. And there are people who are doing it successfully, but it's an incredible amount of work, And I think there's ways. I definitely think there's a way to do it. You just have to structure it really, really intentionally from the beginning. It's kind of like building a nation. You're building a set of bylaws that have to be fair. They have to be just. They have to have a way to resolve conflict. And I think we need to do that. But that's a deeper conversation. It's beyond my expertise.
It's really interesting to consider why we struggle building those kinds of communities, because like it's one thing to have a group of people that you meet with weekly to talk with about whatever it is that you need to talk about, and to just like have that emotional support. But it's another thing to try and actually live in a community of people on the same plot of land. And I've heard the same thing from other people, that they don't see it lasting very long. Inevitably, at some point, like it just doesn't work out. And I'm not sure if you've ever heard of the book Sapiens by, I can't remember the author's name.
Yeah.
Have you read it?
No, is it Sapolsky or is it somebody else?
No, it's like it starts with a Y.
I started. I think I've listened to part of it, but it was a while ago.
Yeah. Well, I apologize for not knowing the author's name, but in the book Sapiens, he talks about how, at some point humans developed myth, to function in communities, that there needed to be some sort of myth that held people together.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps that's something that is contributing to the fact that it's not working out for some people.
Yeah.
It's just I don't know, we're kind of in an interesting day and age where people are deconstructing from religion, but then there are obviously still people who are very religious, and so we've just got so many different worldviews out there, and
Yeah.
if you know have a group of people who come from all sorts of different backgrounds and worldviews, like there just might not be like
Yeah.
enough of a shared myth. But like you were saying, even things like bylaws, things of that nature,
Mhm.
all of those things are
Mhm.
myth, right? Like they don't exist in the physical, tangible form. Like
Mhm.
we all collectively agree that these bylaws are real and we're going to adhere
Yeah.
to them. And
Yeah.
so you do have to really, everyone has to buy into those
Yeah.
shared myths,
I,
if that
I
makes
mean,
sense.
I think I should sort of backtrack a little bit. Here where I live, there are several, like literally, they're just condominium, complexes, and they have like bylaws. And there's several in my local area. There's one called Frog Song and another one called 2 Acre Wood, and they're highly functioning communities, and they live by a set of shared values which are more nature based. So,
Mhm.
so I do think it's totally possible for sure. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So that would be one way, and I 100% agree with you. We do need a myth. Campbell, who I'm going to say this because I think it really helps people understand who this guy was, because a lot of people in this generation don't know who he is. I went to his library. He's written volumes and volumes of like world religion and world history and anthropology. I went to his library, and it was probably I don't know what it is in meters, but in feet, it was probably like 25 feet long by like 15 feet wide by like 10 feet tall. And that all the walls were lined with his books. And then you'd pick up any one of those books and you'd open up almost any one of them. You'd open it up and there'd be little tiny notes in all of the margins.
Hmm.
And so he was the level of a scholar that was kind of not really seen once in a very, very rare. Um, and anyways, and he said, in terms of the myth idea, that he doesn't think there's actually going to be a coherent myth until the whole world adopts a Gaia myth. And I know people, there's people out there that are going to say like, oh no, you're trying to take over the world and you're going to take away my freedoms. And fine, go ahead and say that, but we don't have a monomyth anymore. And every culture that was coherent, like you're talking about, and Sapiens had a monomyth that held us all together. And so I kind of think that we're drifting in that direction. The people like you and I are kind of like, well, for me, I think about it now, like our ancestors are 4.3 billion years old, right? The life on Earth, 4.3 billion years old, and then our psyche, is 4.3 billion years old, and the interconnectedness. I'm writing a little bit about this. We have 10 times more bacteria and other cells on our body and in our body than human cells. So we're 10 times more ecosystem than we are individual, and then
Interesting.
not to mention the plants and the animals and like all of the other things that we rely upon. So to me, it's like if you apply your mindset and you really think through these things, you're going to come to the conclusion, if you get out of your ideology, that we are one with the earth, we are completely interdependent. And that saying that a butterfly flaps its wings in the Amazon, it affects us around the world, is absolutely scientifically true, which makes it mythically true. you know um,
Right.
so I don't know. Any
Yeah.
thought?
I had never really considered that could be the myth that could hold people together again. Like, I'd never really considered that before, but I really resonate with that.
Yeah.
I think it's something that, at least for me, from my perspective, is easy to get behind. Like when you do just look at the ancient wisdom and you couple it with like the scientific model that we have now today, like it makes so much sense that life
Yeah.
is interconnected and that we're all related to one another and that we're,
Yeah.
you know, we don't exist separate from anything else. Like we are just
Yeah.
this one mega organism,
Yeah.
you
And
know.
I think I need to give the devil his due, to sort of speak to the counter arguments of people who are going to say like that's going to be used to squash my personal freedom, because that's the argument. And I think that is true. It can be used to squash personal freedoms, but it really depends on power structures, and it depends on like we really need like a bill of rights. It's kind of like I'm hopefully going to interview Wade Davis, he's a world renowned anthropologist. Hopefully next,
Cool.
and he often cites this quote that the purpose of anthropology is to make the world safe for all cultures and religions. And so I think that you can have this Gaia, this whole Earth life myth, and at the same time be written into that it's our job to make it safe for all other cultures and all other belief structures to exist. Now that's going to mean that they can't try to take over the other cultures.
Yeah.
That's I think the big problem right now is just that the culture wars, or every culture trying to take over every culture. And I don't really know that you can stop that, but I think at least in principle, we have to fight for a world. It's kind of like the idea of democracy. The idea of democracy is that we all get to have our own culture, all our own ideas, our own beliefs. In practice, it gets really sticky. So I think, let's say we did come over with like a whole world mythology where we're all nature, and that world happens, and we're like, now we're healing our relationship with nature. Then we have to be careful that we don't actually tread on top of those older cultures, which are kind of destructive. They got to have their little place where they can go ahead and destroy their little part of the planet, as long as they don't destroy ours. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like thoughts I've never had before, but really we have to honor our differences at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know that I have any real great ideas as to how to accomplish that, because that sounds very difficult. Especially nowadays, like people are there's just a lot of polarized beliefs nowadays and opinions, and like I'm not sure how to accomplish that, but it sounds really nice. It sounds nice to, have all of these cultures still exist within this larger myth that like we all belong to nature, we are nature. Yeah, that sounds really nice.
Well, I mean, I think the first step is, at least for people like you and me, to just saying like, hey, why don't we try to do this? Because I don't really hear other people talking about that. Like, let's try to do that. Let's try to honor one another, and and then honor that we are all nature. Let's see if we can do that.
Yeah, respect each other's differences. Yeah, respect each other's differences, and just all the different beliefs, but also get back to nature. And I think that's totally feasible.
Yeah, for sure.
No matter what your background is, no matter where you live in the world, I think it's still possible.
Yeah. I made a couple of notes of some of your stuff that I was watching. So we've gotten on to